bad.
No, it's
This is
all
my
good.
first day. But I want to welcome everybody to another weekly episode of Nomberg Law Live. And do this, you'd think I'd know when I do this. It's every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. Of course, I'm Bernard Nomberg with the Nomberg Law Firm in Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm so pleased to have a buddy of mine, John Meehan Jr. out of St. Louis with Paradigm Sports. John, how are you doing today? We've already had a little conversation and just got lost in time. How's today going?
Well, for me, like I was explaining, just being based in the Midwest and working for a company in the West Coast, it's kind of cool because 10 a.m. is still kind of, I'm not on yet. Obviously, if I have calls or other things, I am, but like 11 is really when all the meetings get started. So it's perfect timing. I get to eat with the family and then just kind of come up here and relax until the madness begins.
The madness. That's so funny that you call it that. It's just with the world just having changed in this past year. We'll talk just a little bit about how those changes have impacted. But John is an attorney. He's a former college football player. He is a representative of professional athletes, whether it's UFC or NFL, et cetera. We'll get into those things. This man has an energy level like no other. He has always got something going on, and I love following him on social. We don't get to interact enough, but we've been having a good little chat. But John, before I butcher any more about who you are, share a little bit about your practice, your beautiful family, what you like, your activities and those things, and we'll jump right in.
Definitely. Well, no, I appreciate the introduction, and it's always good to be here with you. So my background, I went to Drake University. I played football there, a small 1AA school, but they did make it to the tournament this year. So in terms of NCAA, so I actually went to law school at Drake as well. And then that led to a connection where I worked in the UFC's legal department as a legal intern. So I graduated law school, drove to Vegas, did that. And then I came out and wanted to represent my younger brother, who was the captain at Northern Illinois' football team when they were pretty good. So I was kind of going down that path, and I realized really fast that, my father's an attorney, but he's also a martial arts teacher. So I grew up kind of doing both. And I kind of saw just a way in sports to kind of take this legal knowledge that I had and turn it into something better. So I was running a practice, which I've done, and I still continue to do. I still have a personal injury firm here in St. Louis. My father is in there every day. He's 74. I think I have a younger cousin who may actually be joining us pretty soon. She graduated law school last year at UMKC. And my brother's a public defender in Milwaukee. So we have too many attorneys in the family.
Yeah.
But I think it took a while to build into the sports space, and I've been able to do that. So I've been at Paradigm for, I think, full-time for 2 years, but I think it's been about 2.5 or 3 in terms of how long I've, been connected with them. And we represent some of the top combat sports athletes in the world, as well as NFL players. And we now have soccer division. So with COVID and how things have gone, we just kind of all buckled down. And I think we've actually grown, and we've never worked harder, and things have never been more kind of just the direction of things are going really well right now, given the fact that, we haven't been able to kind of go to the events and be gone, and people have been on the road. It's like, hey, well, if we're all here, let's buckle down and work on things that are going to take a little bit of time. Let's build things that we had thought would take longer, and we were able to do those things because COVID slowed things down. But I do, also I'm working from home now, so I have my wife whose office is right outside my door, and I know she's always, talking about how loud I am on these calls. I'm like you said, pretty high energy most of the time, and my wife's used to it because she's not. We're like that balancing couple, and then my daughter is like a mixture of both of us. So it's always fun with the new dynamic of us being all in the same place together. But yeah, that's kind of my history. So I've been representing athletes. It's kind of interesting, and I think as it relates to you and our relationship, I mean, I manage athletes, so I have my own clients, but, within Paradigm, they've allowed me to grow into a role where, a number of our agents, we call them managers in MMA, but I'd be an agent or contract advisor in the NFL. But our agents are also attorneys. So we have kind of collaborated, and there's 3 or 4 of us who actually are the legal team for the agency. And I think people wouldn't necessarily get that experience because representing clients is very client based, and there are negotiations and things that come up there. But there's so many other business, either whether it's mergers, acquisitions, business ventures that are starting. There's so much legal work just for Paradigm and our clients as a whole that goes on, that I really spend I'd say 80% of my time is, or 70 or 80% is actual legal work, almost as though I was in a corporate law firm, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
it's both. And I don't think there's a lot of opportunities to be able to do something like that, where it's half of the time I'm representing the athletes and handling my clients, and the other half is really being like at a firm to some extent.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing is you're taking your love of sports that you've always had, you did it in college, and you've been able to utilize your law degree to combine those two things. I've always been told that a job is something that you have to do. It's not something you always want to do or enjoy doing. And the difference between a job to me and a profession is doing something you love to do. I love my profession of being a lawyer and representing injured workers and dealing with Social Security matters. And I suspect you're the same way. You love your profession because it gets you that energy drive that you have comes from that sports background. You're not actually competing anymore in the ring or in the octagon or on the gridiron, but you're helping those who are right now. And I suspect that gives you that drive, that energy that you so love. Am I hearing that
It's so
right?
interesting that you say that, because, you know, when I was just running the law firm, I was doing some personal injury and criminal defense. It's kind of, you know, just the basic like starter pack for running a law firm.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some guidance, and, you know, it just, I enjoyed being able to help people, and I enjoyed being in a position where, you know, I could choose my own clients. I could do, I had freedom. But I didn't love the work. You know, you got to love the grind. I loved helping people. I loved the benefits of the work, but I didn't necessarily wake up every day and love the work. And I think where I'm at now, in kind of, you know, having taken the sports law, entertainment side of things 100%, is that exactly what you're saying. I wake up and I don't feel like I'm going to work. I feel like it's like when you wake up, you know, back in college when you're going to practice and you're like, oh man, it's practice again. Oh, we got a game in a couple of weeks. It's like almost every day feels like a game day, because there's a lot of big things going on. You know, a good example, like we have a client out in the Philippines, and there's phone calls and things that go on there. So that's like 2 a.m. my time, 1 or 2 a.m. And that's like noon their time when they prefer to have these meetings. So, you know, if you didn't like what you did, you would be so upset to have to be up at 2 a.m. and have this phone call that could last an hour. It could last 2 hours, who knows? But when you're excited and when it's something that you love, and when you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like, you know, if somebody in college were to say, oh, we got a game right now, let's go. I mean, that same feeling. And I think what you said something similar to this, but the one phrase we've started using is, it wouldn't be a fight game without a fight. So, you know, the fight doesn't always have to be in the ring or in the octagon. It's like we're fighting in the boardrooms every single day, trying to, whether it's negotiations with teams or with organizations, or just kind of brainstorming ideas. And there's so many business to business type of things that are going on, and we're just trying to do our best to help our clients grow. And that, for some people, with the client roster that we have, we're blessed to be representing literally probably the top third of the combat sports world. We've had the highest paying contracts for women's MMA, men's MMA, second highest boxing contract of all time, and kickboxing, we have the #1 contract. So when you have that level of talent, there's so many things that you can do, but you have to grow fast. And I've been blessed to be, you know, have people that I work with who really push me to jump into sides of the law that I've never been in. You know, like I did criminal defense, I did personal injury, I understood contracts, but it's different when it's like venture capital, you know, in certain business or mergers and acquisitions and things where you just kind of get thrown in and you got to figure it out. So I love that I've been able to grow here in this space as a better lawyer. And I also love, you know, just the working for the clients that I do and doing the type of work that I do. So I know you feel the same way probably with what you do. And that's why you do something like this all the time.
I'd say 98% of the time I'm right there with you, but we all have those days where we go up and down that we're ready for the next day. But I got to ask, let's back up just a little bit, John. We know you played football at Drake. You've always had the love of sports, and you go to law school, you get your degree. Your dad's a lawyer, so I'm sure you get some advice there. You have mentors along the way. We all do. But how did you find your niche in representing professional athletes, whether it's NFL, because I know you have to be licensed and you have to go through certain protocol. And I suspect for the other professional leagues, you have to be approved or go through a protocol there as well, but you can't just jump in. So give us just a little bit of your journey about how do you get started with that? Because your
Yeah,
enthusiasm is one thing, but then you got to have
true.
some opportunity.
So I love that you brought this up because there's so many. I get attorneys who are at law firms now, like big law firms, who will come back and say, "Hey, John, I really want to jump into sports. Like, how could I do this? Like, it looks like what you're doing is awesome. Like, how could I get a job like that?" And I don't want to come across the wrong way, but it's like, one, this is a grind. This is not a standard kind of, just industry in terms of how things work. You got to grind, you got to network. Networking is everything. Who you know is everything. So I'll tell you the long story before I explain why that reference to the other people matters. So I came out of law school and I came out of college football and I wanted to fight. My father's a martial arts teacher. I was 22. I felt like, my athletic career, I knew I wasn't going to the NFL, but you just kind of still have some testosterone. You want to test yourself still, and I can still be an athlete, and it's such an identity. So I started training with guys. I was in Iowa, where wrestling is the biggest sport, and the UFC and MMA, the sport of mixed martial arts, was pretty big there. And I decided to intern at a fight company. I just called them one day and was like, "Hey, I'm a senior at Drake. If you need any help with anything, I'd love to help out, but I'd love to just like understand the business a little bit more." And they let me do that. But during that time frame, I ended up meeting some of the athletes who then became my coaches, because I would show up and take the classes. And I was kind of lucky to have people who did mentor me through that. So I was training with the pro fighters, and I was in law school, and it became something where they trusted me. So they started asking me to help them with contracts, or like, "Hey, can you help me find sponsors? Could you look over this contract for me?" And I was like, "Hey, this would be pretty cool to do." So in law school, I think this was my last 2 years of law school, I had my own management company. I had probably 5 guys that I was doing work for, and just kind of sorting my way through the game, not making any money, but really, just getting the experience. And I tore my quad tendon in my first jiu-jitsu tournament. And this was week 1 of law school.
Oh,
So
wow.
literally the first weekend of law school, I had a knee surgery. And then I ended up needing to have another one the first week of the second semester of law school. So I was on crutches. It was terrible. So think of your normal 1L year, and then think of it being pretty much, on crutches the whole time.
Yeah.
It was not fun. But one of my professors asked what happened. I told him I was in this martial arts tournament, and he goes, "Wait, one of my best friends went to Drake, and he is the vice president of business and legal affairs at the UFC." So I ended up, fast forward 3 years, I end up getting the internship with the UFC under a guy named Mike Mersch, who is the gentleman he was speaking about. And he's been a really strong mentor to me for a long time. And now Mike is our outside counsel as it relates to combat sports now. So now he works with us, and he was the one who got me a connection here with Paradigm. But just like you said, my brother was coming out of Northern Illinois, and I wanted to represent him. We had always joked about it. So I got licensed, or I graduated law school. I finished the UFC internship, and I looked at how I could represent my brother, and I missed the deadline. So you can only register in January to take an agent test in June and then you become licensed in like September for the NFL. So I missed it. But what I did was I went out, I met with other agents. I tried to get to know them. I told them what I wanted to do. I introduced them to my brother because he was going to need one. And in kind of doing that, I kind of started that network. And I realized that, even here in St. Louis, there's some good connections to have here. And I really spent that year kind of just building, reading books, doing everything I could to learn. So then as soon as I could take the test and register again the next year, I did. Unfortunately, because of my brother got in a car accident a week after his bowl game senior year and fractured his hip. So his NFL dreams, luckily I was doing personal injury law at the time. So, we got him taken care of.
Right.
But I had kind of had all the wheels churning and everything going in the right direction. So I just said, I'm still going to do this. And I was able to pass the test and kind of get going in it. So what I would tell people who want to get into the sports world is kind of the opposite. Like, I know you said it's not easy to just jump into. You just have to jump into it. Unless you can get an internship somewhere, and obviously my internship at the UFC helped for me to understand the fight world, but it didn't help me go recruit clients. It didn't help me kind of have the skill set you need to go out. I was driving to games on a Tuesday night. Maybe I was driving, let's say, Northern Illinois. My brother played there. He had teammates that I knew. I played at Drake. I have a bunch of friends who are now coaches other places. I had 3 head coaches at Drake. So my coaches are other places. So that network of who you know and having a good reputation, I can go to a coach and ask him about it. I'll never ask him to put me in contact with a player, But I could ask him just, what's this kid like? Like, is he a good kid? Like, do you think he has what it takes? Like, what's he like in practice? Blah, blah, blah. And then you got to make your own way. But that means that, the agent life was a lot of driving, 5-6 hours for one night to go to a game, meet somebody's family. You can't even take them to dinner at that point in time if they're still playing. So you really just a lot of really bad hotel rooms and long drives by yourself. But over time, you kind of start building that network. You meet other agents. You go to the combine every year, and all the staff of the NFL is there, and just making those connections. And I mean, that's what it took. So I think there's a lot of people who ask about becoming an agent, and I say there's nothing you can pay as long as you have a law degree or an MBA. You can go take the test, and if you take the test, then you can become an agent. Now, it doesn't mean you have clients, but when I get the lawyers who ask me about how to become an agent, I tell them all the time, why aren't you an agent then? If you want to be an agent, there's nothing stopping you from taking the test. But it's kind of like applying for a job before you have a degree. If you have the degree, then you may be able to go meet with other people and get some guidance. So, yeah, it's interesting.
It is, and it's anything that people have ever watched in the movies. Forget about that. That's the movies. It's the thing that you can be the smartest lawyer in the world, but if you don't have the skill set, the personality, the desire, the grind that people don't see, maybe your family sees it, but the clients are going to ultimately see it, but they don't see all your man hours to where you've gotten to, you're an overnight success after 10 years, that kind of a thing. And
sure.
And speaking of good contacts, our mutual buddy, Tyson Mutrix, is with us today.
What's up, Tyson?
He had some kind things to say, which is shocking for Tyson about me, but I guess because you're on, he has some nice things. But thank you, Tyson, for joining us. We got a whole bunch of other folks. And if you guys have questions, of course, I'm talking with John Meehan out of the St. Louis area, Paradigm Sports. We're talking about being a lawyer and being a representative for professional athletes. And John, where I kind of want to pivot a little bit in our talks is let's talk about combat sports. Let's assume that I'm a fourth grader or even younger, and I don't know anything about that. I just know I see people fighting in a ring. So give me an elementary, overview of what is combat sports, and then kind of break it down to the different types of either leagues or types of competitions.
Yeah, sure. So combat sports would essentially be anything that we would call like martial arts, like mixed martial arts, kickboxing, boxing, any of those full contact martial art type sports. Really you could put wrestling in combat sports. I think we think of it that way quite a bit because it's such a lead into, there's a lot of skilled wrestlers who go to college who then become, MMA fighters, potential champions in the UFC, things like that. So when I talk combat sports, we're talking about any sort of combat activity that is regulated and run like a sport. So there's so many different ways to break it down. It's a global sport. That's the other thing. So very much like soccer, it's global. The UFC is pretty much the biggest in terms of mixed martial arts, which we call MMA. There's Bellator, there's PFL. These are all televised. These are all kind of major companies, but then you have regional companies. So the way that this works is you would have, like in St. Louis, we have certain fight promotions in the state of Missouri and St. Louis. Maybe someone wins a championship there. From that level, you pitch them to the UFC or to Bellator or to PFL, one of the high level pro leagues, where they can actually sign a multi-fight contract where it's not just, hey, we'll let you fight somebody on this day, this time. It's, we'll give you a contract for 4 to 6 fights, and you're going to only fight for us from 4 to 6 fights. So this brings up a lot of legal issues because there's an ongoing lawsuit right now. There's a lot of questions about, with a lack of a union in mixed martial arts or any sort of, boxing, really combat sports in general, are these contractors or are they employees? Because they're paid like contractors. But they can't fight anywhere else. They have to fight under this organization, and the contracts are very, very tight, and they restrain people. So when it comes to being an attorney, when I'm doing the NFL work, it's easy. I can see what every contract is out there in the league. I know what the salary cap is. I can see what every similar player is making. There's nothing like that in combat sports. And what's reported is usually not correct. So it's the Wild West, and it's not the most professional industry. You are not sitting down in a formal, like think about negotiating with a prosecutor or with an insurance adjuster. There's a certain level of respect that you're probably going to have with that person. In the world of combat sports, it's almost like you're at a bar with somebody and you're trying to negotiate something with them. So, I've told people that I think my college football coaches are the only people who talk to me as bad, if not worse, than some of the matchmakers in the combat sports industry. Wow. Because, it's very brash and it's a new industry that's growing. So I like it because it still has that edge to it. But on the same note, it's becoming a very big business because of the global reach.
Well, John, is it in part because the people that you're trying to secure fights with for your athletes, they have the upper edge, the leverage in this, and there's so many other athletes being represented by other representatives also vying for that same contract that your guy or woman is trying to reach and secure.
In the NFL, that's what it is, right? There's a limited roster spots, and you are trying to get, like, we have two guys that are free agents right now that should both end up on teams, but it just has so happened they had a 1-year contract and free agency just started. But that's where that leverage is more so like player to player to some extent, because it's about who's on the roster, who do you have, is he better than this person or not? In the combat sports, it's hard because the leverage is just all with the league, so the league or the promotion, we would call it. So at the UFC with Bellator, except the fact that, like I got brought in this company 3 years ago. We have clients because I work with some of the best agents on the planet. I mean, Audiatar, our CEO, Tim Simpson, our director of MMA management. I mean, we represent Conor McGregor. We represent Israel Adesanya, current UFC champion. We represent Chris Cyborg, one of the greatest, probably the greatest women's fighter of all time, current Bellator champion. Rico Verhoeven, who's the Glory heavyweight kickboxing champion out in Europe. So when you talk about leverage in general, yes, if I try to go get one of my young guys into the UFC, the leverage is going to be off, and you're going to kind of have to just take what they give you and hope that they just offer you a multi-fight deal. But when you have some of the athletes that we have, we're blessed to be in a position where we actually may have the leverage, So, but that doesn't come across well. It's not. It's a fight all the time. Just like I was saying earlier, the fight is not just in the octagon or in the ring. It's every single time you go back trying to help benefit your clients and put them in a position where their future is going to be better. And this is a high risk sport, more so than, I say football, I'd say that it's on par, but football, technically you're not trying to hurt somebody. You're playing the game and that's an ancillary effect. Right. But fighting is, the whole goal is to physically disable somebody temporarily. That's really what it is. So, what like you said with work and other things, we talk about it's the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. If you have a client lose in the Super Bowl, that feels a certain way. You're upset if that were to happen. But when you have a client lose a championship fight, if they get knocked out in front of the world and you're going to see that highlight for the next, until they fight again pretty much, or kind of rebound, it's a hard sport. It's emotionally rough to be a part of.
And I suspect, much like in certain professional leagues, let's just say American football, where the life expectancy of the athlete is only a couple of years, it's probably even more so for the athletes in the combat sports because of the physical nature of the sport itself. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. So to talk business about, let's look at both of those. So the NFL, they're the lowest paying contracts in most professional sports. Like the NFL, the minimum contracts are somewhere around $400,000 or $500,000. That's if you make the team. Now there's ways where they can split a contract where if you're on an active roster that week, you make a higher amount. If you're on an inactive roster, you make a lower amount. So they can chop it up and dice it up so many ways that, yeah, your contract could be decent, but you still have to hit all these checkpoints of how many games did you play? How many snaps in the games did you play that can lead to other bonuses? So it's not great, but you're still making $400,000 if you can make it to that level. If you're on the practice squad, it's back in the 110s, 120s. But if you look at MMA, most starting contracts in major organizations would be what we call 10 and 10. So 10,000 to show up, and if you win, you double your money. So that's how a lot of it works. There's lots of incentive to win these fights, but then most organizations have bonuses. So if you get the submission of the night, the fight of the night, or knockout of the night, it can be a $50,000 bonus. So imagine going in knowing your only guarantee is $10,000. and then you knock somebody out, and now you just made 10 plus 10, so that's 20, and then you got the 50, so that's $70,000 just because of your performance. So it encourages you to go out and be aggressive, which can sometimes be detrimental to your career in terms of just the physical toll that it takes. And I think the shelf life in the UFC is less. It's less injury wise. You only have 2 or 3 years. It's more so that the competition is so fierce and there's so many really good athletes, and now you're getting the crossover of the former college athletes, the college wrestlers, the college football players who go learn how to fight for 3 years. You got Greg Hardy, who's obviously a very controversial figure, but he's now fighting in the UFC and he's done pretty well. So you're looking at, it's just that they will throw you to the wolves. There's no easy path in the UFC. Once you're signed and you earn that contract, it's like the cream has to rise to the top, and they will cut you. If you lose 2 in a row, you lose more than 2, depending on what weight class you're in, you could be out.
There was a former University of Alabama football player who's done very well for himself, Eric Andrews.
I don't know why I can't remember his last name, but I know who you're talking about. Eric Andrews, yeah.
Because I'm in Alabama, and anything going with Alabama sports makes the headlines. He's been in the headlines over the last couple of years. So it's interesting how former, or not former athletes, but athletes from their other sports are making their way into mixed martial arts or combat sports. Well, John, we've just got just a couple more minutes, but sure. I do want to touch on 2 things. We're going to get to Drake sports in just a minute because I know they're playing spring football right now.
Yeah,
and I know the basketball team.
Well, I think they're finishing their season technically. They're playing season games in the spring.
Right.
COVID.
Right. And I know that the basketball team just lost to USC in the opening round of the March Madness. But what I want to, before we get to that, I guess I want to, from your experience, if I'm in law school right now, you talked about making contacts and networking and those things. Would you have any recommendations of types of classes? Is there anything that would help you from that standpoint? We all know that in law school, you learn the law, but it doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer. Is there anything to concentrate on? Maybe contracts, or I don't know. I'm just asking a little bit of advice here.
I mean, I think contracts is important. Obviously, like 90% of my life in this space is contracts, whether that's our athletes' employment contracts with the leagues, whether that's their sponsorship contracts, which we spend a ton of time on. The bigger the sponsor, the bigger those contracts are. The contracts is very, very important. Now, the other piece of it would be like any sort of negotiation or like dispute resolution, because in reality, so much of what you're doing is the negotiation of these contracts. So like a contract, I think people think that, yes, there's a contract, someone gives it to you, but the amount of times you go back and forth. And then once I tell people all the time, the major terms of a contract are the easiest thing to come up with. We can put down the major terms, but then you're going to spend, if that takes you a month to get the major terms down, all the ancillary terms and everything else, that could take 6 months. You could be fighting over the little details. So contracts is important, negotiations is important, and any sort of dispute resolution. But what I would encourage people to do, and this is what I did, and my law school peers really used to joke about it. Like, I wasn't the one going to the Supreme Court banquet and all these kind of things, because I offered to work for free at this fight company, so they'd have fights on Saturday night. I was there. I did everything from putting together the octagon or the cage before a fight to commentating. I was a radio TV production major, so I filmed some of them. So I just dove in and tried to help wherever I could. And those connections kept growing until I'm in the position I'm at now, where we're really on top of the combat sports world. So I think the most important for any student is if you're interested in any sport, you have to put yourself out there. And I'm saying free, go out there. Don't expect a job. Don't expect anyone to want to help you. But if you say, hey, I want to help you, I don't care, I just want to learn things, and I will help with whatever you need, then all of a sudden people, that's a way in. Who doesn't want free help? But I think a lot of people expect to jump in and, they don't want to pay me anything, so I don't want to do this. Well, then you don't want it bad enough. Because everyone I know struggled through this industry until they kind of hit that cross section between experience and skill, and those things kind of caught up with each other,
I cannot agree with you more. And I think it's for any profession, frankly. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant or you work with your hands for a living or whatever you do, making yourself available having the desire and the drive like you've described for yourself and that you're recommending. And a lot of it in life is who you know. And it's just
I
combining.
tell people that's so, I mean, being an agent is that. And think about being an attorney. I mean, being an attorney, your client base is not, I mean, there's marketing and other things, but a lot of it is who you know. The people that know you will send people to you. And same with the sports world, except it's my athletes I may know a coach and they're coaching a certain athlete. So then I can, ask them about them or get a referral, something like that. But it could be the leagues. I mean, you can't just call the UFC and say, hey, I got this guy, you should bring him in. They will very, very quickly tell you to go, kick rocks. And I think it's just the more you build a network of trust and of respect with just everybody. And I say everybody because when I have an athlete, I don't know who's going to be their next sponsor. It could be, I could have an issue with a visa. I could have an issue with, taxes. There's so many things in balancing their careers where everyone that could possibly help in some way. My wife's a graphic designer. I used to get her to put together things for that we're doing. And it's just, yeah, networking is everything. And real networking, not like pass someone their business card, but like go take someone to lunch. Get Tyson. The whole reason I'm here is because I knew Tyson, because Tyson worked in my office, or like we shared, we both rented out of the same building, and he would go out of his way to help me like learn how to run a law firm. And then he was like, why aren't you doing more sports? Why aren't you doing more sports? And now here we are. So it's who you know and the real relationships that you build that dictate where you're going to go.
Don't give Tyson any credit, please. This is a public conversation. We all know what he's about. No, he's an awesome fella. He and Jim Hacking run Maximum Law, Maximum Lawyers, and really that's how we ended up becoming friends. And before we get out of here, how do you describe to your daughter, who's 4, what a griff is in relation to Drake University?
Well, the thing with Griff and the things with, and I think you're talking about the dog, right? Like we have like a mascot. So every year during the Drake relays, they do something where it's called the most beautiful bulldog contest, where they bring out all these bulldogs from around Iowa and they choose which is the prettiest bulldog, the most beautiful bulldog. And that becomes the mascot for that year. But actually, I think it may not be every year. I think they do the contest every year, but I'm pretty sure Griff has been there for a minute, unless he's just the reigning beautiful champion. But that's what happens. And, it's a fun tradition. Like Drake, I loved it. I mean, I stayed there for 8 years. I did undergrad and law school. I met my wife there. She was a volleyball player. So I think, I have a lot to be thankful for from the random city of Des Moines, Iowa, that I never expected to be at. Football brought me there. So, I'm Bulldogs all the way. I wore blue stuff when they were in there. I had my Drake gear on. I had my old football Letterman jacket because it was cold one day. Like I've literally been all draked out for the last week.
And now, are you telling me you have a pet bulldog named Griff?
I don't. I have a pet boxer dog named Leonidas. So
nice.
Yeah, I have not dove into the Bulldogs yet.
That might just be a little overkill, but that's awesome nonetheless. John, thank you for spending some time with me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. And it's always good to see you, hear from you. And, I love that you continue to do this.
Absolutely. Now, how can folks get in touch with you if they want to talk about law, they want to talk about MMA or anything related to what you do professionally?
Definitely. Just reach out. So I'm a big Instagram guy. I don't really do Twitter well. I barely ever check it. I kind of check for news, but across all platforms, Agent Meehan. So Agent, my last name, Meehan, is Meehan. You can find me across any social media platform with the same handle. And I'm, any questions you have, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm kind of always working and always bouncing. I'm one of those very like ADHD people, which is helpful in this industry because things come at you left and right. So I try to, at the end of the day, sit down and actually get back to emails and texts and things that I couldn't handle because I was putting out fires. So feel free to reach out. And like I said, it's about who you know. So I'm happy to meet anyone because everyone that I know in this industry had someone, just like the law, point them in the right direction and somebody kind of take them under their wing and just put them on the right track. So I'm happy to be that for whoever I can.
Awesome, John. Thank you. And guys, as we do each week, it's interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And if you can't feel the energy coming off of John and what he loves to do, then you're missing the boat here. But thank you again, John. And guys, this will conclude us for this week. Each week, Tuesdays, 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific, Nomberg Law Live. Hope you guys have a safe rest of your week. Be well, and we'll talk to you another time. Take care.